Hi, and welcome to Chapter 5, Learning Objective, I believe 2A. And what we're going to talk about here is revisit a couple of things that we looked at in Chapter 4. And we're going to start using the idea of elasticities with these particular types of subcategories, if you will. So let me go ahead and share my screen with you, and I will show you how we do this. There we go. Okay. So what we're looking at in this particular learning objective is related products or different types of goods. So the related products that we talked about were substitutes and complements. I'm going to start with the first type here of normal and inferior goods. Remember that normal goods were goods like name brands. They were new to you. Maybe mall as opposed to Walmart kind of stuff. Inferior goods were store brands, used goods, or off-brand. Now remember back in chapter 4, what we did was we discussed the idea of, again, holding all else constant. So I'm just going to say that up front, all else held constant, other things equal, that in a normal good, as income increases, our demand for those goods will shift outward and to the right. Notice the positive correlation. We said for inferior goods, as our income goes up, our demand for inferior goods decreases or goes inward. Notice the negative correlation. Okay, now also we talked about the difference between substitutes and complements. Remember, substitutes were basically the same type of good where you didn't see a whole lot of difference in the utility or want satisfying power of that good or that service. So they're kind of the same. You can switch between them very easily as a consumer. And remember, we said that as the price of good A increased, the quantity demanded decreases, all else held constant. And because the price of good A increases, and we see good A and good B as substitutes to each other, the demand for good B will increase or shift outward and to the right. Notice that when we look at the correlation here between the price of good A and the demand for good B, it's a positive, right? It's positive correlation. For complements, what we said were those were goods that are used together. So like golf balls and golf clubs, horses and horse equipment kind of thing. So what we said there is that the price of good A increases, that will cause the quantity demanded of good A to decrease, all else held constant, which will cause the demand for good B to decrease. Notice the negative correlation between the price of good A. Ooh, let's see if I can find that one. That's a bad color. Okay. Between the price of good A and the demand for good B. One goes up, the other one goes down, so that's our negative correlation. I don't like yellow because you can't see it very well, so let me see if I can switch up to a different color here. Come on, switch. Okay, so this would be negative correlation. So kind of recalling that becomes important to understand these concepts. You can always go back and review that for chapter 4. I'm sorry, from chapter 4. The first one we're going to look at is this bottom one, okay? So different types of goods, normal and related. Then we'll tackle substitutes and complements with respect to elasticities. Okay, so what we have is an ability to mathematically prove if something is normal or inferior good. So we're going to use a formula very similar to the elasticity of demand, but notice this is sub I, which means elasticity of income. Now, a couple things are different about this particular equation is we are no longer going to use the absolute value. So I'm going to say positives and negatives matter here. because that's really our interpretation. The second thing that becomes important is back in the first objective, I gave you a boilerplate to interpret elasticity of demand. Given a 1% change in the price, there will be a blank, whatever your answer is, percent change in the quantity demanded, all else held constant. There is no boilerplate here because notice we are not talking about price. So sometimes P-L-A-T-E. So there's no boilerplate here. So positives and negatives matter, and your interpretation just simply says if the elasticity of income is positive, then this is going to be a normal good. That's all you're going to say. If the elasticity of income is negative, then this is going to be an inferior good. Now, I often tell students that a little common sense on this stuff goes a long way. Because if you think that if your income goes up and you buy more steak, that makes sense, right? So if your answer doesn't show that, go back and check your math. If your income goes up and you're showing you're buying more hamburger as opposed to steak, that's counterintuitive. So your answer is probably mathematically wrong. Okay, so here's some income elasticities. I apologize that it's so small, but I found these on the internet under some really good study guides, which are out there. And if you're interested in them, you can certainly give me a shout out and I will make sure I post those. But this just kind of says, one of the things we talked about was a percent of your income. Okay, so the share of the budget spent on things. And then here's the price elasticity of demand. That's the one that we've looked at before. So that was elasticity of price, okay, or elasticity of demand. And here's our income elasticity. So I just kind of thought this was interesting and I thought I would show it to you. Okay, let's take a look at an example problem. Suppose that the initial income of a person is $2,000 per month, and the quantity demanded for the product is 20 units. When their income increases by $1,000, their quantity demanded increases by 40 units. What's the right elasticity to calculate? And explain your answer. Okay, so essentially we're going to pick apart this problem, and if our income, here's our income 1 at 2,000. Here is our Q1 at 20. Here's our income 2 at 3,000. And here's our quantity 2 at 40. Using the elasticity of income formula you saw on the previous slide, we're going to take Q2 minus Q1 over Q1 plus Q2 divided by 2 over I2 minus I1 over I1 plus I2 divided by 2. Now, if you can look at this and just go, okay, income went up, the quantity went up, positive, 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 this must be a normal good. I'm perfectly fine with that. But here I have to calculate and explain my answer, so I'm going to make sure I do that. Okay, Q2 is 40 minus Q1 is 20. I'm just going to go halfway in between if that's all right with you, which is 30 over I2, 3,000 minus I1, which is 2,000 over 2,500. So I end up with 20 over 30 or 2/3 or 0.66, repeating, over 1 divided by 1,000 divided by 2,500, about 0.4. Again, if I can just look here, I know this is going to be a positive answer. So if I didn't have to show my work here, and you're okay with that, I'm okay with that. And we have the elasticity of income equals 1.65. It is a positive number. So when I explain this, I'm only going to say, because it's a positive number, it is going to be a normal good. Now, the higher this positive number, the more it's considered a luxury. Okay, so if I were to ask to compare them, I could compare them, but see, one's kind of our actually, in this case, 0 is our barometer. So 1.65. So if I had something that was like 5, that might be a yacht. This is probably a necessity, say a 1 to 2 elasticity. But again, it's positive. So I guess in terms of the short answers, that's all I want you to be able to do is to calculate the proper elasticity and to tell me that it's a normal good. That's it. Don't talk about percent changes and this and that, because it doesn't really apply to this particular formula. It's a little bit beyond where we're at. Okay, our second elasticity is going to take a look whether or not these two are substitutes or complements, related goods. And remember back from the intro slide here in this objective, I said substitutes have a positive correlation. Make sure I said that right, because now I'm rethinking what I said. Yeah, substitutes have a positive correlation. I thought I got that wrong over there. Whoops, there we go. And complements have a negative correlation. Okay, so again, very similar. It's actually the same ARC formula that we use for elasticity of demand, but the difference here is we're comparing the quantity of one product to the price change of the other product. So notice it says A and B, but the formula is actually the same. Okay, so remember, substitutes are going to give us a positive price cross elasticity, and complements are going to be a negative. Okay, so this kind of shows here's our barometer at 0. These two are unrelated. And the more positive it is, the more of a substitute it is. For example, Great Value milk with Meyer milk. Okay, very close substitutes, high positive number like 5. If they're very close complements, maybe golf balls and golf clubs, milk and cookies, then we're going to see a very negative number. Okay. All right, so here's some examples of substitutes and complements. So here we have price of coffee, cups of coffee, and cups of tea. And I threw this extra information in here to mess with you. I did it intentionally. So coffee, we have the price of coffee. And what I'm interested in, remember the price of one product, how does that affect the demand for the second product here? So the quantity of good B. So what I'm looking at is the price of coffee and the quantity of tea. So I don't really need this information, okay? Be aware of that because we'd love to do that to you. So I'm doing elasticity of cross price. And remember, that is just Q2 minus Q1 over Q1 plus Q2 divided by 2 over P2 minus P1 over P1 plus P2 divided by 2. Now, I am not going to take the absolute value here because those positives and negatives are going to matter to me in terms of what this is. Now, a little logic up front. What are coffee and tea? Yeah, we're going to expect this thing to be positive, right? They're definitely not complements. I'm sure very addicted to caffeine like myself. Okay, so let's start with our quantities. So here we have Q1, and here we have Q2. Here we have P1, and we have P2. So I'm going to go ahead and do this. I'm going to say 10 minus 5 over, halfway in between, 7.5 over, let's see, 55 cents minus 45 cents over 50 cents, halfway in between. And I can see already that this is going to be positive, right? So I have 5 over 7.5 over 10 cents over 0.50. So that gives me, Let me just get my calculator. 5 divided by 7.5 is 0.66 repeating over, I think it's 0.20, but I'll double check. Hey, look at that, 0.20. So 0.66 divided by 0.20 is about 3.3. 3.3. This is positive. And again, pretty positive. So we would say that these two are substitutes. That's all you're going to say. Okay. That's the end of this learning objective. There's not really some good examples in your book of this, so I definitely want to take some time and show you some example problems. I'll see you back in objective 3. Thanks.